All right, I'm kicking off with a shameless plug here for an amazing book, Cannabis Queens by Melanie Wentzel. The author of that book is joining me today. Melanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be on Give Toke. This is amazing.
We are both on theme and on point this morning with our pink sunnies acquired from the Cannabis Queens launch event in Queensland. So, look, it's
Yes.
not the most practical eyewear for a podcast,
No.
but I'm glad that we can kick it off with them.
Me too. Me too. On brand, babe.
Well, speaking of that, I'm in my pink Give and Toke hoodie sweater because once upon a time my branding was pink. I'm wondering how much pink has been added to your wardrobe since the release of Cannabis Queens.
Oh, so much. Look, I'm even representing today so much. So I've always loved pink, but I moved away from it for such a long time because I mean, people who know me in real life or who've seen me around know I dress like a 15-year-old at a skate park. Right? I mean, if it's not a hoodie and trainers, I don't know what it is. But since going through the process of Cannabis Queens, not only because of the brand, but because of the journey, I've actually, my wardrobe is very pink, very pink. And they say, I read somewhere that when a woman starts to heal, she starts to love the color pink again. And you know what? That struck a chord for me. So I think there's something deeper there, but yes, all the pink.
That is absolutely lovely. And look, I'm going to claim some of that healing property as well. It's one of my favorite colors. I adore it. So, yeah, very on point and on brand today. Now, Cannabis Queens isn't just a book. It's not just a title. It's a declaration. What does it mean to be a cannabis queen in 2025?
First thing to say, it's not only about gender. For me, as a woman, I write from a lived experience through a feminine lens. But a cannabis queen is not about a hard gender binary. It's not only about women and the work that women do, it's about the work that non-binary people do, but it's also about men connecting with their feminine relationship with the plant. And that has evolved because it did start as an industry piece and it started as an industry survey. What are women doing in the industry? Let's track it. Let's find out who we are. And women was inclusive, of all people on the gender spectrum, except those who strictly identify as men, because that's my lived experience. And I'm a woman in the industry. But as we've gone on, and more men have had conversations with me, and please know, I love men, right? I love everyone. For me, this was about picking not an underrepresented population in cannabis, but an undercelebrated population in cannabis. But as we've gone on and more men, and you and I have had some of those, the most beautiful examples of this, conversations around, okay, when I take away the bravado, when I take away the, how much THC, when I take away the, how many cones can I punch, whatever, right? When you take that away and you kind of sit in that more that softer space with the plant and think about your relationship with the plant and reflect on that. I think it's more about our feminine relationship with the plant or our soft relationship with the plant. It did start as women in industry, but like anything amazing, it's evolved and grown, and so it bloody should.
I think it's unfortunate to have to preface it, but I think it's a little bit of an Australian necessity to say that like celebrating women is not an attack on men. And I think it's really
Correct.
important that if any man kind of sees it as an attack on them, just to take a step back and go, bro, it's not all about you. It's about a movement. It's about a mission here. And it's really
Mm.
important to specify that. You kind of wish you didn't have to, but you do.
You absolutely do. And when we talk about, I talk a lot about the partnership between stigma and shame. Stigma is something that is a part of the cultural zeitgeist. It's a non-valid belief about a particular characteristic, like someone who consumes cannabis.
Yeah.
And then the shame is our personal lived experience from stigma. So they're two different things. You can cast shame on someone, you do that from a place of stigma, but shame is actually an emotion. It's what we feel. So for women, not only do we live under the stigma of, oh God, cannabis, we live under the stigma of, uh, oh God, cannabis, and you're a woman. What about your children?
Yes. Yes. Somebody please think of the children.
But you're a mother. Who will pack the lunchbox? You know what I mean? And a part of that, a part of a part of history that's informed that is the overt sexualization of women in cannabis. Now, again, people who know me or who have been on the journey with me will know, look, I'm very sex positive, and I think people should be sexualizing the hell out of themselves for fun if it makes them feel good, whatever that looks like, however that turns up. But when someone else sexualizes women as a form of control, as a form of disrespect, and as a tool in propaganda, it's not the right thing. You can always sexualize yourself. Nobody else should be sexualizing you, because when you sexualize a woman from a male or from any gender lens, when you look at a woman and sexualize her, it's a form of objectification. You're turning her into an object of pleasure, as though she lives to please and serve you. So we don't want to sexualize others. That's what's all over the propaganda posters. I mean, you know, titties out, arched back, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Hey, it's that arched back
I've
reproductive
literally got it behind
package,
me. Yeah, adults only.
right?
It's a woman lounging back. It's talking about the shattered dreams and wild orgies.
Right? I mean, to be honest, sounds like a good time, but also also don't do it to women. Don't use it as a tool to control women, because then again, it links into that the Madonna and the whore.
Yeah.
Right? You are good and great and wholesome and worthy of marriage and a perfect vessel for bearing children, or you're a whore who smokes cannabis and we're going to sexualize you and we're going to put you naked on a poster so you become an object of pleasure. The truth is that women are more complex than that. It's not a binary. We're not good or bad. We're not, sexual or demure. We're all of those things all at once.
I love that we're not shying away from the hard topics here. And, we're kicking it off really with it's a big kind of, I don't know, bucket of cold water or something, just to wake people up a little bit and
Mm.
understand why this conversation is so important. It's not just, a little personal passion project. It's super important to the progress of society in general. Now, you alluded to stigma. The cannabis industry, cannabis users are still trying to fight stigma and dismantle it. It's still very much a part of many people's lives. Like, I'm privileged to say that it really isn't a huge part of my life anymore. Whether it was the self-discovery in Canada where I realized I don't need to be ashamed of this, coming home, transitioning into the industry, things like that. I don't have a lot of pushback in my life, but I know that a lot of people still do. What role do women play in the transformation of that stigma? We've all got a role, but specifically, what is the feminine role in dismantling stigma?
Yeah, I love that question. I love that question. I think at a very personal level, it's for, and I'm talking about all women, not women who are pro cannabis and seeking the abolition of stigma, all women. If we return to ourselves and remember who we are, and we think to ourselves, okay, so as a woman, there's a very clear and obvious set of standards that are placed upon me in society. If I'm a mother, I must raise good children, particularly if I'm raising men. If I choose to have a career, I must be the most polished in the room. I must be the most professional. I must be the best presented, the most prepared. I can't tell you the number of times I've written a 60-page project plan and my male colleague has turned up with 2 PowerPoint slides,
Yeah.
right? And that's not right. But again, that is a part of womanhood. So there's that. If I'm a woman and I'm a wife, and I'm imagine in a heterosexual kind of normative space, if I'm a woman and a wife, I must be devoted. I must be. I must serve. I must represent my man well. You
Yeah.
know. So, and if we think about that, and as women, how that relates back to removing stigma, I think we need to remember that, okay, there's all these societal norms that are placed on us as women. Another one is that we certainly should not be consuming cannabis. So as a woman, particularly someone who's cannabis naive, or just considering what their relationship might be with the plant, or someone who is absolutely anti cannabis, the the stigma and the expectation that is placed on women around cannabis and on all people who consume cannabis is made up. It's made up. Like the expectation that women should be devout and serve their husband, and the expectation that if I'm a mother, I should raise the best children who go off into the world and do this. It's all bullshit, Paul. It's
Yeah.
all made up. It's all made up, and it all comes out of a form of control and how we've built societies and how we've evolved societies. So for anyone who's considering what the plant might mean, even if it has nothing to do with you, I would call to women to say your role is to recognize that that those societal beliefs around cannabis are all bullshit, just like the ones that are thrust upon you. So reach into yourself and release those so that A, you can just let people live, and B, consider, if maybe you have had an incorrect belief or an uninformed belief about the plant. So I think it's about internal. I think it's for women, and it's a part of our journey as women, understanding what's expected of us, what we were raised by. People with the best of intentions raise women. And if you think about, I love the example of children's T-shirts. Little boys' shirts have sharks and
Yeah.
dinosaurs on them.
Yeah. I'm aggressive.
Yeah, I'm dominant.
Yeah.
I'm a predator.
Yeah.
Little girls' T-shirts have bunnies on them
I'm
and
prey.
unicorns. I'm prey. Chase me. I'm pretty, and also I'm your victim.
I'm so dainty.
Right? And I'm guilty of putting a shark T-shirt on my son when he was a kid, but I can tell you now, if I'd had a daughter, she'd have had like a more ferocious
Yeah.
shark. But
Yeah.
that's just me. So yeah, look, even people who are well-meaning support and generate and continue to embed these norms. So I would say the role of women in stigma and the role of femininity in stigma is to recognize the patterns that have been thrust upon us and let that inform the idea that, in fact, we should not be continuing to embed those. We should not be supporting those. We should kind of take a more curious approach. And if not a curious approach, just be indifferent.
Yeah.
Just be indifferent. It's okay, because it's all bullshit. It's all made up. The whole world is made up.
Just all a social construct that we subscribe to at varying levels based on
Yeah,
our own emotions and shame and guilt. Some days it's just like, I'm so weak that I need to subscribe to everything that the world tells me. Then there's other days when you're on the top of the world and you realize that, hey, it is all bullshit.
that's right. And we all go on that journey, and everything is changeable. And just taking that step back in and watching yourself and how you operate in the world when you can, when you have capacity, because it's a hard gig being human, especially right now for many people, more so than me even. So yeah, I think just take a step back, and if you can't be soft and nurturing and supportive, just be indifferent and get out of the fucking way.
Hell yeah. I think that's a really good point. I think so often again, typically Australian to kind of push up against something that doesn't make sense or that isn't understood, rather than just like you said, step back, be curious, and then if you can't even be curious, at least be indifferent and give people that space to hold space.
Absolutely.
So the book is absolutely wonderful. It's amazing. I've had this in my possession for a few months now, and there's so many incredible stories and incredible women, incredible people in this book. It's huge for the space. It's so important. It's full of amazing stories about other people, Mal, and I want to know more about you and your story because you've said, you are not the center of this book. This is a
Correct.
movement. You are not the Cannabis Queen, but I do want to know about you more. What have you learnt about yourself and your own story through the development of Cannabis Queens?
I'm so pleased that you've asked. And, in preparation for today, I was thinking about what good friends we are and what a soft, warm space that you are for me. And certainly that Give Toke is as a piece and as a community. So, yeah, I'm really happy to share a little bit more about myself. Um, I'll start by saying I've been a little bit more quiet publicly over the past few months, and I've had a few people reach out and go, all good, what's happening with things? And I have taken a little break because I've been on a journey myself. I'm a human living this life, not for the first time, but we're all learning new things. I was new to writing. Oh, not new. I'd written another book previous. I'd co-authored another book. I've co-authored some other bits. I've done public facing stuff before, but Cannabis Queens is like, it's a whole other thing, right?
It's a huge statement.
It's a huge statement. And because I believe leadership is both a privilege and a burden. And the burden is that you have to be authentic and expose yourself and stand before people and say, you know, I choose to lead in this space because I have a message to share and I'm bringing all of these people with me. You know, the privilege of it is that you get a platform and you get to celebrate people and their voices. When I started writing the book, I saw, you know, people started paying attention when I was doing the survey. And then I started writing and inviting women to be interviewed. And then more people started paying attention. And within the space of, I mean, I only had the idea for Cannabis Queens in February 2024.
Well,
Okay. So
that's a good turnaround time.
right. We're not even 18 months into the journey. And what happened is when the book released, because of the incredible support and because of the fact that Cannabis Queens is not a new conversation, it's fuel for the existing flame. I am very much not the first woman to talk about women in cannabis. And even anyone alive today who has been doing that work, and I honor them, it is not the first. Women in cannabis has been a thing for 5,000 years, you know. So for me, it was about fanning the flame. It received a lot of attention and it's received a lot of love. You know, a highlight for me, like I ended the year last year being featured in Forbes,
Yeah.
right? So it has had a lot of attention. I went from being, you know, known within my LinkedIn circle to really, I've been so privileged. Like you know, I don't want to sound like a knob, but but you know, I get random emails and parcels and things from people just saying thank you. So with full modesty, in the acknowledgement, this has been popular and it has been loud. To be honest, Paul, it's quite confronting. And it really kicked off in October last year and ran through to January. So October, November. So for 4 months, I did my first ever not my first cannabis related podcast, but my first Cannabis Queens related podcast. And over 4 months, I ended up, you know, with all of this incredible attention. And it was amazing. And that's for the book. And now let me tell you what that was like for me. It was very confronting. It was, I felt quite exposed,
Mm-hmm.
but I reminded myself that, again, this is the burden of leadership. If you want to show people that it's okay to tell your story, you have to go and tell your story, because you have to be not even first, but you have to turn up. So turning up for everyone was my focus, and I was so comfortable in that. But I got to January, had the Cannabis Queens Australia launch, and I just very quickly kind of withdrew. I still have my full-time day job. I work, you know, I'm a health strategist for Canem. I work full-time in the industry. I have for coming up on 3 years. I had previous success in mainstream healthcare. So it wasn't, you know, I had plenty to do, but I really withdrew into myself, and I've been doing the work on myself. I'm happy to share I've gone back to therapy for a little while to reacquaint myself with this new version of myself. So yeah, it was a bit confronting. One of the confronting bits is that I did share some very personal information in the book, not a lot. There's 2 paragraphs, I think, in the whole book about me, which is intentional. But those 2 paragraphs, one is about my childhood, and I'm going to expand on that with you today because you are such a soft space for me. And another one was about a very violent sexual assault I experienced. And those pieces went into the book. I'd never told a handful of people knew on earth. I've now put it in a book and sent it to 15 countries and put it all over the world.
Yeah.
So that was another piece about withdrawing. So the nature of those stories. I'm not gonna get emotional. Have you had anyone cry on Give Toke
You
before?
will be the 3rd person that has cried on this show and the first female that has cried. So I do like to think that it's a safe, welcoming space for this opportunity.
Okay, good. Well, we'll see how I go. So, look, I was born in 1979 in the western suburbs of Sydney, and everything that implies. So I grew up around Casula, Liverpool, not Flashdale,
Yeah.
not Flash. And in fact, I was born into a family who were, to my mum and dad. I'm an only child. I was born to my mum and dad who were, affiliated with a very well-known, very violent outlaw motorcycle gang. Yeah, and I was in that life, and I was raised in that lifestyle for the first 3 years of my life. And what that looked like, and I learned this on the journey with the book because I knew there was something. So while I was writing everyone else's stories, I started unraveling my own and interviewing my own family and family friends. So I, for the first time in my life, late last year, really understood the scale of what that life was like. I would be at my high chair at the kitchen table, and there would be 5 or 6 bikers, and including my dad, sitting around shooting up heroin.
That's a lot for a young person to take in. And I think a lot of people would justify something like that as, oh, they're only little, they're not really noticing. But you are a sponge as a child, absorbing your world, your experience, your trauma. So that's a hell of a lot for a little one to go through, even whilst not understanding it.
That's right, because I have snippets, but we don't remember, even as adults, we don't remember details of situations, but we remember how we felt.
Right.
So imagine as a toddler sitting and having all these big, big, scary men,
Yeah.
and your own dad sitting there, shooting up and doing all, and smoking cannabis and doing all the things. That house that I was raised in was full of drugs that were for sale,
Yep.
full of guns that were used. There were, there were abductions in cars. I mean, there was not, I didn't get abducted, but that's the kind of activity that was going on around me. So that's the context. The real kicker is, here it comes. The real kicker is that when I was 3 months old, a newborn baby, my mum and dad, who again, I'm sure had all the best intentions in the world, they were just living their life, took me out to the outback, which is where we have a lot of family out in central New South Wales, for me to meet the family for the first time. We went out there. It was the October long weekend in 1979, and my mum and dad went out shooting. The original story was, shooting rabbits for dinner. I suspect not. And content warning, violence, gun violence. My dad shot my mum's face off. She was in the front seat of my grandfather's station wagon. He was at the back with the boot open, and although there are mixed reports across the family of, oh, the gun just went off, or he was trying to unload it, I'll
Yeah.
let people decide for themselves. So my mum lost all of this. Her face was blown out. She survived.
Wow.
So she was transferred to hospital. They were just throwing blood into her. Eventually, she was transferred by, rescue chopper to Sydney, where she stayed in hospital for the first 9 months, 12 months. So for the balance of the first year of my life, my dad took off.
Wow.
3 months old, both of my parents disappeared.
Just what a little one needs.
Right. So when people think I have an avoidant attachment style, you are correct. You are correct. Don't
Hence
get
the
close.
benefit
Don't
of
hurt
therapy
me.
here.
Hence the therapy, right? I was very fortunate. So my mum's older sister, my aunt, who I loved very much, she had a son who was 5. She raised me for that first year. To this day, she is my maternal attachment.
Right.
Um, and my older cousin, we function as brother and sister, and always have. Um, when my mum returned from hospital, she took me back, and an interesting detail. There's lots of funny details around it that come up as I think about it. So one of the interesting details is that when in our family, I call my aunt, I call her auntie, and people will often say, "Oh, what, do you think you're Māori or something? Like, you call everyone auntie, like, do you think you're Indigenous?" And I was like, "No, my whole family calls her auntie." And do you know what I also learned last year? The reason we all call her auntie, I didn't think this was the bit that was going to make me cry. The reason we all call her auntie is because when I was learning to speak in my first year of life, I started calling her mum.
Right.
And to train me not to attach to her as a mother, my whole family and everyone who came in the house had to call her auntie.
For
So
you.
for me.
Yeah.
And so that when my mum came back, I would learn to call her mum. So imagine a baby learning to speak, forming a maternal bond. Her first word is mum, and she said it to the wrong person. But it actually wasn't really the wrong person,
With
Um,
everything she did for you and the way she treated you and everything she made you feel at one of the shittiest parts of your life without you having the capacity to understand what was going on. That's a pretty special person.
Amazing. Um, so there's lots of things. So when you think about how do these things impact your life, the devil's in the detail, right? So, yeah. So, my mum came back. She got out of hospital. She'd had uh, hip bone used to replace her jaw. She'd had skin grafts, all that stuff. And came back looking quite good. She'd been on a tracheotomy the whole time. It was, I'm sure it was awful for her. No one likes being shot in the face. And I don't take away
That's
from
a
her
hell of a
trauma,
quote from this podcast. That's one
right?
key takeaway for everyone today. No one likes being shot in the face. Yes, I agree.
Correct. So I acknowledge her journey and her hurt and her trauma, and very much it impacted her mental health for the rest of her life, which unfortunately then impacted me. But again, another kicker for you, right? You would think that she would then start her life over. Yeah, no, we moved back in with my dad.
Oh, fantastic. There's a great track record. We'll do this again. It didn't
Let's
work
go back for
before.
more.
It'll work this time.
Right. So for 2 more years. And that's when, and so that's what I grew up around. So how does it impact me? Look, I do have an avoidant attachment style. I am really confident publicly, and the confidence you see is genuine because
Yeah.
I know what I've done in this life. I've earned this confidence because I've worked hard to learn and do all of that. So that public persona of me, the LinkedIn photo in the white suit with the legs spread in the, all that is very genuine. That's how I turn up for my career, because that form of power for me is a really authentic way to add value. But in my personal life, yeah, I'm quite avoidant. I love my friends. I form beautiful, loving friendships. I form, I've got beautiful relationships with most of my family. But I have just never experienced parental love. I just was someone who was raised without it. So from 3 months old, Paul, my programming has been look after yourself. You don't need anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So doing Cannabis Queens was so healing for me because I because it was about holding space for everyone, and I couldn't have done it without everyone who shared with me. So yeah, it does it impact me now. Look, it impacts me in two ways. Number one, it's made me a much better parent. I have an 18-year-old son. We have the healthiest, most beautiful relationship. Raising him is my greatest achievement. How does it affect me negatively? It actually impacts my romantic relationships.
Yeah.
So I'm single. I've been married. I've been in other long-term relationships. But that and my raging ADHD, fully diagnosed and now medicated, it makes me choose, surprise, surprise, dangerous men. Surprise, surprise. So if for me, even recently, this is funny, because I told the therapist about it and she goes, "Can you hear yourself?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." I was like, "I've just started seeing this guy. Yeah. He's got 666 tattooed right across his stomach and a big tattoo on his face that says dead inside." I was like, "Oh, but he's so hot." And I was like, "Oh, and he rides dirt bikes and he's got the big Hilux with the lift kit." She was like, "Can you hear it?" And I was like, "Oh, shit."
Mel, these are the guys that every time I come to Queensland, be like, "Oh, mate, how do you live in Victoria? How do you live in that shithole? Oh my God, mate, how do you do it?"
I
I know these
know.
guys, Mel. I know them. They're no good.
They're no good. I really have to start, I really have to start swiping left on all the Gold Coast tradies, to be honest, because I'm really ruining myself. I need a good boy. So yeah, look, that's how it impacts me now. And I did, I did learn about it through the book. I knew there was stuff there, but I did really learn about it and get to understand it. And even things that happened before I was born that I haven't gone into today, but that contribute to that. I mean, violent, getting rushed, gang members rushing into the house and carving up. Look, it's terrible. So that's my coding, my programming from a baby has been life is dangerous, look after yourself. From 3 months old, I've done a lot of that. So my return to Cannabis Queens, and at the very start of the journey, I told everyone there is no way this book's going to be pink. There is no way it was going to be
That did
black and
not
white.
work out. That did not
I
work out
know.
at all. Look at this hot pink, the hottest pink.
The hottest pink on it. But see, that's a testament because when I started, I was like black and lime green, black and like fluoro green. But by halfway through, this book was hot pink. And so yeah, I think we can see. I mean, when I spell it out like that objectively, you can kind of see the journey. And it's, it's been for me personal, but there was a lot of healing that happened for the women as well. I can't tell you how many times during those 300 hours of interviews I cried with women, and the discovery and the inclusion of the parts about me in the book were about meeting those women at their level of generosity, in terms of how authentic and how safe they chose to be with me. And I wanted not to piggyback on that, but to meet them there. They had a lot of skin in the game. There's a lot of stories in this book um, that are a risk for women, right? But yeah, I just wanted to meet them there. So it has been a journey, but we're back in pink and we're in therapy and we understand our attachment style. So, we're working on it.
There's the next Cannabis Queens merch. Back in pink, back in therapy. I would wear that too. I'm a staunch believer in the power of therapy. And if you're someone that thinks it might be useful for you, give it a try and work your way through a few psychologists. I've had a great one. I've had a not so good one. I've had an okay one. And I've worked my way through that. It's not always flawless, but it's
Mm.
a really important thing to explore when there are things sitting at the back of you, whether you know about them or not, that do need working on. So, look, I don't want to reduce your experience, but I am wondering if there's an underbelly Melanie Wentzel story in the pipeline there.
I mean, I could write the hell out of that. I could write the hell out of it. Imagine. I'd love it. And please don't, because I already have 6 writing projects that I've started
No
and they're
more.
all sitting there. I don't need a 7th right now.
Well, on that note of kind of what you've authored, you've got you've got works in the pop culture space, but you've also got some works written in scientific journals. Cannabis is really unique when it comes to that intersection of culture and medicine, and you see both sides of this conversation, particularly on LinkedIn, a lot. Just today I saw a doctor talk about the cannabis industry taking the piss, and these are broad brushstrokes, but I digress from my question. How do you balance the scientific credibility with radical storytelling?
I think straight to the heart of it is that people make decisions based on emotion. You can know all the evidence in the world, but if you have an emotion or a feeling about something, all evidence is out the window, right? Dead inside 666. Got a feeling, all evidence out the window. Okay. Um, you can understand scientifically as a clinician, noting that only 7% of Australia's 31,000 GPs currently prescribe, 6.89% are currently prescribing under AP or SASB. You know, so 93% of Australia's clinicians, they know how to read a journal article, they can see the research being done, but they still get the ick.
Yep.
Because they have the ick, they don't do it. So the radical storytelling we need to do and to balance with science, it needs to reach the right audience. It needs to be really balanced for credibility, and it needs to be done in partnership and with engaged champions. And what I mean by that is those people in the industry, in the rec space, in their normal lives, who come out and go, cannabis is a panacea, it's for everyone, it's from the earth, because of the cannabinoids, we know this plant was created by the universe for humans, for healing. Yeah, I actually don't disagree. But that narrative is not going to land with someone who worked for 7 years to become a doctor and is not prepared to take a risk, right? So that extreme position of, you know, cannabis is everything for everyone and everyone should have the plant and da-da-da. Again, I don't disagree, but your messaging is wrong. For those who are at kind of the other end of the spectrum and only talking science, and as a part of the academic community, although I'm not an academic, I'm very blessed to have strong partnerships in academia. You know, I get to run research. I'm very close with some of Australia's most wonderful researchers and cannabis researchers. But as an academic, it's only science. So if it's not a randomized controlled trial and it's with a massive number of participants and we've had the most perfect survey design and everything else, if we do everything right in academia and we get incredible results, as scientists, we still say, but this is just one more piece of evidence to go into the body of evidence. So even science and academics, it's even if the evidence is great, we go, well, this is just one more piece. Look at the end of every research paper. What are the limitations? You can't publish in a peer-reviewed journal without noting your limitations. So there's that. So you've got this extreme, everything is great. You've got, even if we've proven everything is great, we have to acknowledge the limitations and continue to build and continue to build. You have to meet that in the middle. You have to say, here is the evidence and here is how it relates to a human story, right? Here is what it looks like. A patient story is a really good example, but patient stories are kind of low on the evidence spectrum.
Yeah.
So you have to, again, think about your audience. Who is a patient story going to work for? Well, a case study will work for GPs and specialists. We love a case study. That's good. A patient story as shared on a documentary like High Science, which Canem is a part of, you know, those patient stories can be very effective, but they're largely for a rec and public audience in the American space.
Yeah.
So they don't generate change because people who watch cannabis documentaries already bloody like cannabis.
Yeah, documentaries and I know this word isn't for everyone, but documentaries and stoners, it's a pretty hot combo.
Right. I mean, not mad. So it's about how do we do that effectively to grow the industry? And a really good example that I'm excited to share is that as a part of my work, when I came into industry, my point of difference in industry, and it largely remains true at this point in time. My point of difference is that my background is psychology and large-scale system reform in the Australian healthcare system. I've delivered over $10 million in healthcare transformation projects for the Department of Health, federally funded, the state governments, the primary health networks. Like I used to report in on the Victorian integrated care model. I used to report directly into Greg Hunt for that. I've done that big picture work. I understand how to reform systems. I speak the language of not only the academics, but also, you know, the people who manage those systems, both in the the government funded and in the not-for-profit and in the privately funded healthcare space. So I understand that audience. I also understand cannabis. I've had a relationship with this plant since I was 15. Like everyone, it's waxed and waned over my lifetime. And it's in its most beautiful place right now in this moment. So it's taking it's meeting in the middle, it's understanding your audience, and it's crafting a narrative. Okay. Radical storytelling is crafting a narrative that serves the audience that you want to activate.
There's a lot to unpack there, and it's actually not about unpacking, it's about stewing on that because I think you have, as you've explained, you understand that there are two really significant sides of this coin. You know, it's kind of like the industry in general. The legacy folks need to understand the corporate folks, and the corporate folks need to understand the legacy. And in the patient relationship with healthcare professionals, the healthcare professional needs to understand the patient's needs, but the patient also needs to understand where that healthcare professional is coming from. You know, there's a lot of
Yeah.
outrage in the patient community about certain elements of this system. We know it's a very flawed system, but we also know it's something to be very proud of. So you can focus on the negative, you can focus on the positive, but somewhere in the middle, there's a workable outcome for everyone because these doctors and healthcare professionals are treading unfamiliar territory. We can't be shocked that they're maybe a little bit concerned, a little bit worried, a little bit unfamiliar. This is brand new to them. On the flip side, for a patient like me who came from Canada where for 2 years I had access to recreational adult use cannabis and could treat myself, I still greatly appreciate the care from my doctor, but I also oftentimes know different things than they do. I'm not going to say more because that's absolutely not the case, but different things. And there needs to be a balance found there. So you sit right in that intersection of understanding the culture, understanding how important this plant is to people, but also understanding that we're squeezed into a framework that has some very specific expectations. So we're not going to solve this today, but it's important to understand both
Yeah.
perspectives.
Yeah, 100%. And a takeaway, if I may offer a takeaway for that, for people who walk away to reflect on that, you know, the patient team partnership is key.
That's right.
That if you have to create a partnership, and it's hard with in even mainstream healthcare with 10-minute medicine, etc. It's even harder in cannabis where we often have high volume short consults. I personally don't believe we need an hour consult for cannabis, even for a new cannabis patient, unless that patient, that person has very complex chronic conditions, and so on. I don't think you need an hour. We don't do it in mainstream healthcare. I don't think we should be burdened with the requirement for it in cannabis. I think it should be available, and it
Yeah.
is at some clinics. But that patient team partnership requires commitment from the patient and the team. And the team is the doctor and the nurse practitioner and the clinic operations lead and the care coordinator and the pharmacist and the dispense tech. Okay, that care team has to wrap around the patient, and that will be done well and poorly in different circumstances. But anyone who's interested in understanding better what a patient team partnership can look like, take a look at the 2014 paper by Bodenheimer. It's on the 10 building blocks of high performing primary care, and it talks about kind of the dream, the dream medical practice, and it talks about what are the pieces that are required for really beautiful high performing care that serves the patient, and one of those blocks is the patient team partnership. Mainstream healthcare is still on a journey to get there. That's a lot of the work I've done has been around high performing primary care and system transformation. So the whole world isn't there yet. We're not lagging, but actually cannabis and cannabis prescribers and cannabis patients have an opportunity to almost do that better than anyone else and go, look at how we do a patient team partnership. And that team is that whole team, and that requires system design. So if you're opening a cannabis clinic, think about it. You have a responsibility to deliver high performing care, and there's plenty of great papers you can look at, but Bodenheimer 2014 is a really good place to start.
Very cool. I'm going to use the opportunity, like where we're talking about kind of relational challenges or relational needs, to swing back to Cannabis Queens a little bit and ask the question about whether you have faced any criticism for focusing on the role of women in cannabis. I'm going to assume having faced some of these people myself, particularly in Canada, that there might be some bros that are a little offended. But I'm also really curious about potentially women who didn't want to be aligned with the movement for whatever reason, whether reputable reasons, not quite reputable reasons, whatever that may be. I know that people can focus heavily on the hate or the challenges. So I don't want to platform this in a way to think that it's
Mm-mm.
some overwhelming thing you're dealing with. But I'm sure in Australia, with our culture of tall poppies, there have been some challenges in this regard. So where have you faced resistance?
Yeah, great question. And I haven't actually shared this or spoken about this previously because, it's not glossy and sexy and we don't, I haven't made room for it. So I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, that's turned up in a few different ways. Um, One way that it's turned up is very understandable, perhaps not as supple or open or acknowledging of other women's journeys as I would like. And it's typically come from quite established, visible, high performing, incredible women that are typically kind of in their 40s and above, who have rightfully earned their place and fought without the support of a giant pink book and, noisy redhead. Um, who
Another
will
shameless plug.
Another one. But it's who have said to me, and these are women I respect, these are women I count as friends, and it happened as recently as at the Cannabis Awards. Again, women I admire, women I respect, and whose position I acknowledge. Um, they will say it's about merit.
Hmm.
You should pick the person not based on their gender, but about their merit. Who is the right person for the role? Yeah, bloody oath, you should pick the right person for the role. But when the deck is stacked against women and we haven't had the opportunity to learn, to do the education, to have the experience in roles because we were raising children, because we were overlooked for leadership roles, because we weren't a part of the bro club, for whatever. Yeah, it's about merit, but it shouldn't just be about who on paper can do the job. It should also be about who is the right leader for that position. So there's a real conversation around meritocracy. And I do get it from very established women who just got in and did the job and earned their position 100%. For those people, I would say, let my work and the work of other women honor you and celebrate you for having done that in such a shitty, challenging environment. I've had another way that kind of criticism has turned up has been I've had people who I was previously very friendly with. I would go so close as to say kind of friends, um, decline to participate, and then spend the last 18 months entirely ignoring the work and me because I imagine it's pressed a button. Who,
Mm.
who is she? Why does she get to have that conversation? Well, everyone, I feel like I'm really being vindicated. This is great, Paul. Thank you. Well, I'm no one. I'm no one special. I just did the work. I just created something I thought should exist in the world. I have never once said it's the best cannabis book. It might be. Don't know. Some people think it is. I don't necessarily think so. I think it's one of the best examples of a book that celebrates women in cannabis. That's for sure. I think it should be a part of the canon, that's for sure, but it's one voice at one time. Who is she to do this? I'm going to ignore this. She's overly promoting herself. Well, no, I'm taking up space and then holding it for others. If I had written a book about myself, the Melanie show, for sure, hate me, right? But it's like that meme. Imagine hating me and I'm at home like this, holding space for all the women in the world.
Yeah.
So it's either been, well, I didn't need you to get where I am. So, good work, but also not, kind of diminished the importance of it. There's been completely ignoring. And then there's been, there's been some opportunistic pieces where people have gone, oh, Cannabis Queens is popular. Let me tie my brand or organization to it. get the clout, look like we're supporting women in cannabis, and then not deliver. I've got to protect these women in industry, because I'm not here to call anyone out. I will say very high profile American organization let me down literally 4 hours before the Vegas launch, as in there was nothing booked.
Wow.
I won't go further, but I will say, to ride Cannabis Queens for clout for a few months, then to not deliver. It's not the only book launch that I was let down on either. There was another international book launch. Yes, all the clout, love this, all the promos, got the juice out of it. Launch cancelled 4 days before. So there are opportunists. So that's another way that's shown up, which is not so much a form of criticism. It should be a compliment, but it's kind of shitty. And all the way back to, I did start the journey with a publisher. And that publisher saw all the drafts, knew everything. There was no secret what this was about. I'd spoken.
Yeah, it wasn't like broccoli princesses, for 6 months, and then you're like, aha, it's actually about weed.
Yeah, it wasn't that. And they dropped me 6 weeks before the book was due to launch. It was supposed to be getting typeset and going to print. No, we no longer are comfortable aligning our brand with cannabis. So 6 weeks before the book was to launch in Vegas, I had no publisher. The book was finished, but it had only been kind of poorly edited by them. It wasn't typeset. I didn't have any artwork, only what we'd been developing on the side, which I had to trash because it was their IP. So again, really nice for them to ride that, for a minute. So it's actually been, and I'm not kind of going, oh, wow, poor me. I'm just being realistic. If you want to make a difference in this world, you need to create something. And I've heard you say it so many times, Paul. You say, just do the thing, just do something, just do something. You're exactly right. I believed in a world that would be improved by a book that celebrated the work of women in cannabis and captured this point in time. So I bloody wrote it. And after all of that journey and all of those letdowns, I've spent $24,000 getting this book to market. I've made 14.
Yep.
That doesn't count all my international travel and all the time spent. So if anyone ever questions, oh, she over promotes herself, oh, she must be rich from the book. Nah, bro, I'm poor as hell because of the book. But it was never about the money. I believed in the world where Cannabis Queens existed. And so I've created that world.
It's a hell of a full circle moment, because you've experienced some of the stigma in the creation of this book that informed the creation of this book. And you realize like the constant roadblocks and barriers that can come up to operating in this space. We are dealing with stigma. We are dealing with people who, want to ride the wave, and then for the same reasons they wanted to ride the wave, then bail on you and leave you. But your sentiment matches a lot with how I feel, and it matches with one of my favorite quotes from the book from Emily Testro, which is make your own role, carve your own space out, because no one else is going to do it for you in this industry. You have to do it yourself. So I think it's a nice little way to come full circle on this incredible book. It's Cannabis Queens. It's available at cannabisqueens.world. Please, guys, make up that $10,000 loss. No.
Please.
Get it, because it's a hell of a great book with amazing stories. There are so many women that I already knew and loved in this book, and there are so many people that I'd never heard of in my life that I'm now familiar of the work. So what do you hope to be the legacy of this book, and where are you next on the Cannabis Queens tour?
Yeah, look, the legacy of the book, I think I'm going to get spiritual with that. For me, I actually think I was simply the agent to create something that was kind of spirit called. I'm quite a spiritual person. And I think that sometimes we're called to do things and we act as agents in this world for it. So in terms of the legacy of the book, I can have my hopes, but I don't think I'm in any way in charge of that. I actually think whatever the purpose of the reason I was called to do the book, I think that will play out regardless. What I would hope is that it moves the needle. And you know what? It actually bloody already has. So I've achieved that. I had hoped initially it would shine a light on women who are doing amazing work and allow women to form more community and have greater empathy with other women and grow that community. It's already bloody done that. So I'm very happy. I wanted it. Yeah. So actually, my hope for the book, I've kind of already achieved it. In terms of how visible the book is, I've kind of already achieved it. So for me, I'm in this beautiful space where there's a green field and I just get to watch the wonderful things that happen with it. Where I go next. So I mentioned I've got 6 writing projects that I've started. I've got
Just a cheeky
notebooks
6.
everywhere. Yeah. So one is, they're not all cannabis related. My favorite one that I've done, a bit of development on that I think is really fun, is that I had the recognition that there are very, very, very few, like less than 5, girl stoner movies in the world.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, there's like 2 that you could call girl stoner movies, and then there's lots of things like Broad City, which has that as a part of the storytelling. But there's no like Girl Pineapple Express. Imagine the movie Bridesmaids or Pitch Perfect, right? But the context is high-performing women in the cannabis industry. But we're always going on wild adventures and chasing product. And, a woman once described to me how women work in the cannabis industry as like the Martha Network from The Handmaid's Tale. And it's actually kind of true. So I think there's a story there to be told. I am in talks. We're actually seeking funding at the moment with a really exciting American producer, Emmy Award-winning producer, to do a Cannabis Queen series. We've been kind of funding seeking for about 6 months. That's happening alongside season 2 of their existing show, which is High Science. So I'm hoping that we see something happen there. But in film and television, stuff either takes 2 months or it takes 4 years. So that's a journey I'm exploring. And yeah, I don't think it's another book right now.
Yep.
If it is another book, it will focus on the rituals of cannabis and how we sit and commune and consume with the plant today, how women relate with the plant today. How is that the same and how is it different from ancient Egypt, ancient China? How is it different across different markets? And I do think there's a research piece in that. And the final thing I'll share is that, and I haven't shared this with anyone, but I'm looking into starting a PhD next year.
Right on, right on. Well, that's a hot little exclusive here for the Give Toke podcast. It's coming up in, 7 years' time, Melanie Wentzel, PhD?
Well, let's see. I wrote Cannabis Queens in 9 months. I'm hoping I can smash it out quicker. We'll see. We'll see.
I love it. Well, Mel, we actually have still quite a bit more to cover that I'm excited to cover. We might focus the next topic on a bit more of a rapid fire format. But before we do that, I want to take a little break, get weird with you, and have some fun with a quiz. Now, this is an essential part of the Give Toke podcast experience for me. I do like to get weird with it, and I don't get to get weird with it as often as I would like. So seeing as we're good friends, I am going to get weird with this one.
Please.
The quiz is called Wentzel or Not, a quiz of sounds, snacks, and queens. And in a play on your surname, the quiz involves words that kind of sound like Wentzel. So it's multiple choice. There are 5 questions. Do you have any questions for me before we start?
Oh, no. Take me on the journey. Let's get weird.
All right, let's do this. Question 1. Auntie Anne's is a famous food chain in North America known for its what? Known for its what?
Oh, wait, it's multiple choice. Sorry, that's my ADHD.
You know what? Yell it out again, because...
Okay, pretzels.
Pretzels is correct. So look at that. ADHD driving right in, but you know your words that kind of sound like Wentzel. The options were going to be pretzels, or schnitzels. So you nailed it.
Thanks.
1 from 1. Question 2. This vibrant and colorful bird found in Mexico, Guatemala, and the United States is a Quetzal, Hansel, or Fensel?
Fensel.
Denied.
Denied. It is actually the Quetzal. So it is a green and red vibrant bird found in North and South America. It's a really lovely one. So you are 1 from 2.
Okay. God.
Pressure's on.
Pressure's on. Yeah, pressure's on.
Question 3. Who won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar for the film Glory? Was it Melanie Wentzel, Denzel Washington or Pete Wentz from Fallout Boy?
Oh, I'd love to say Pete Wentz because I love him, but I think it's Denzel Washington.
That is correct. That is indeed correct. One of two of Denzel Washington's Oscars. Question four. Who wandered into the woods with his sister and almost got baked into a pie? Was it Hansel, Fransel, or Pete Wentz from Fallout Boy?
Pete Wentz from Fallout Boy, obviously.
Denied.
Come on.
First answers are getting taken, so no, I'm not giving you that one.
Okay, fine.
Your lucky last question is, what is the name of the drummer from the Screamo / Crabcore band Attack Attack? Is it Denzel Washington, Andrew Wetzel, or Pete Wentz from Fallout Boy?
I'm not going to throw this one. It's B, Andrew Wentzel.
That is correct. And you know what? Here's a little bonus question for you. Who is the bass player from Fallout Boy?
Pete Wentz.
There we go. You got it.
Thank you.
You'd already
I was
passed
going
the
to be
quiz.
like Patrick Stump, and then I was like, no, he's lead. I was
I
running
should have
through it.
actually thrown you off with that one. Look, I know that like the best of us, that there's some closet emo screamo business going on in that brain of yours, Melanie.
Yeah.
I think that was 3 from 5 on the Wentzel or Not, a quiz of sounds, snacks, and queens. Well done.
Thank you.
So I want to head towards the end of the show talking a little bit about your, your work in healthcare strategy and innovation. I've got some questions that kind of pertain to what you are expecting to see in healthcare over the coming years, whether it's cannabis exclusive or in general. So the first question is, knowing that you've graduated from Harvard's Digital Transformation in Healthcare program, what are the biggest changes you're expecting to see in healthcare in the next 5 years?
I think there's an expectation from governments and industry, what they're expecting to see. I don't think that will be met. I think there is a different type of provider emerging. So what I would expect to see is this a shift in the medical cultural zeitgeist around system design. For me, I'm a traditionalist with healthcare systems. I believe that healthcare should be in the community, centralized around an integrative GP who is the center. He's the primary contact for the patient, and who pulls in experts as required. Anyone who has experienced a very, very good integrative GP to manage their healthcare, and I am blessed with the best, will understand that that is the ultimate. It's like the Gucci of healthcare, right?
Love it.
And it's really achievable, actually, in primary care across Australia. So the Australian healthcare system, for context, think about it as a 3-stack. The bottom and biggest layer is primary care, which is your GP in the community and associated resources, the practice nurse, the practice team. That's federally funded. The next level up is state funded, is largely privately funded, and that secondary care. So think allied health, when you go to the chiro, when you go to the psychologist, when you join a group healthcare program, a diabetes program. The kind of upper layer, the smaller layer, and the reason they're stacked like this is because we want patients to be met here and only escalate into tertiary care hospitals as needed. So what I would like to see, and what I've been working on for over a decade among amazing healthcare leaders who have been working on it for many decades, is healthcare meeting people, person-centered care meeting people in their community here, the right care at the right time. That's where I see cannabis positioned, to be honest. So that is what I think. That's what I think academia would expect. That's what healthcare leadership would expect. That's what governments will expect. And I know because it's what I used to do and what I used to target my efforts on. I love that model. I don't think that's where we're going to land. Yeah. I think there'll be a sector of that. What we're seeing is this trend, and it's particularly driven by digital innovation, is in clinics, private clinics. Think about a cannabis clinic. It's not someone's primary care GP. So over in this model, a primary care GP takes care of all of your health needs and links you in. What we're seeing is cannabis clinics, and then we see a weight loss clinic online, and then we can get a medical certificate
Yeah,
online in 5 minutes. Look, these are e-commerce businesses that are painting themselves as healthcare. Not all, but that model is an e-commerce model of healthcare. When it's executed poorly, it's simply painted as healthcare. And I'm talking about like the medical certificate thing, right? Or this asynchronous care where you can just text a doctor back and forth or whatever. When it's done poorly, it's done poorly. And I see it being done poorly. I also see it being done very well.
that's right.
Yeah, there's some really, really great examples of it. People are moving towards that model where rather than centralize our care around one clinical practice or one doctor, which for people with chronic conditions is actually going, and complex healthcare is actually the best place to go. People who are typically well, like the worried well or the low flyer in terms of the health system, who, I mean, I'm very well. I rarely go to the doctor except if I'm, there's something in particular. People are choosing the convenience of that. They're choosing, it's more of a pick and mix. What do I need for my healthcare at this time? Now, implemented well, I believe also in that system, because if a patient knows their body, if a patient is activated and taking responsibility for their own healthcare, they know if they just need the contraceptive pill, you can organize that over the internet. If I want to experiment with weight loss, but I maybe don't want to tie that into my big piece of healthcare, I'm just going to do that clinic. If I want to look at medicinal cannabis, but my own GP is not willing to do that and doesn't have anyone to refer to because they haven't built those relationships, well, I'm just going to dip in there. So while I think that this model, this traditional model, the one that I love, that I think is absolutely the ultimate high-performing healthcare model, and I think it's the most important, especially for people with chronic and complex conditions, I also see those people who are more well and who just need a little something dipping in over here. And we're seeing that shift. What I would like to see is us integrate those with the patient having more agency and more autonomy over their healthcare and managing their own healthcare rather than relying on the doctor. So what I would like to see is the patient at the core of their healthcare journey, and pulling in their care team and selectively curating a care team. That takes a lot of health literacy. I could do that. I'm sure you could do that. There are millions of people who would have no idea and no interest in doing that. So there's two models. And I don't think there'll ever be just one.
One of the things that has stood out to me in my work in the cannabis industry when I talk to doctors is one doctor said this to me, but it's resonated with me in every experience. They go, patients never turn up with a pen and a pad. And it's such a simple strategy to maybe just take a little bit more accountability, track it. If I'm struggling with a medication, it's important that I write down what days I struggled with it, how long after I had it, that I was still struggling with it and things like that. Because then when I turn up in front of the doctor and just go, oh yeah, I had that. And I was a bit nauseous and I was a bit unwell. And he's like, when? For how long? And you don't have any of that reference point. It's hard to care. So it's not on the doctor to do everything for you. They do still have to lead, they are the professional. But one of the really cool things about this space is how often the doctor, and I speak from experience, my cannabis doctor says, my patients know things that I don't. My patients lead me on things that I don't. I can't possibly know all these 1,400 products. So you raise some really great points. And I think I would love to see more integration. It's been challenging for me in the last couple of years to see my under 40 string of GPs get so uncomfortable when I talk to them about cannabis. The first doctor I saw a few years ago for my mental health awkwardly wrote relief on a sticky note and went, oh, maybe contact these guys. And that was the last she wanted to speak about it. The next next GP I had, when I was experiencing pain and I didn't like the painkillers, and I said, I use medical cannabis and it actually really alleviated my pain. He went, oh, we'll need to get you something stronger then. This was a guy my age. And I'm like, I kind of wanted to believe it was the old doctors kind of aging out of maybe not understanding and accepting, but that's insulting to the older doctors who are all for cannabis. And it's also insulting to the work that needs to be done to change these minds. So you've got a very clear vision and I completely agree, but we know a lot of people aren't living that experience. But I would love if I could have one doctor covering all the bases for me, because unfortunately, they're drawing lines in the sand, and I think a lot of patients are experiencing that.
Yeah, 100%. And when that is the case, like if you think about if that is your experience, and I'm very fortunate because I'm having this very experience right now, but I knew what to look for. And the benefit of that system is that your doctor then, or your care team, the doctor and nurse practitioner, then can see, here's the blood work, here's what came back from, here's the letter from the cannabis prescriber, here's the letter from the psychiatrist with the ADHD medication approval, here's the feedback from the psychologist who said we're going to focus on that, here's the feedback from XYZ, from the pharmacist. And then that doctor is an integrative doctor and integrates all that information into a full and complete picture of the patient and what the patient's experiencing. It is gorgeous. It's just that it's so hard to achieve. It's so hard to find, and it takes time to build it. So yeah, I've used phone clinics. I do a quick thing, and I'll be honest as well, I don't always declare that I'm a cannabis patient if I'm going to a different specialist, not because I'm ashamed, but because I know that it will be a barrier to the care they might otherwise do. And as one of, the loudest public voices about, pro cannabis, I'm not ashamed to admit that. I'm happy to admit it, because if you're feeling hesitation about discussing that, you shouldn't. But even the people who have made themselves public about saying I use cannabis still sometimes don't do it. So it's okay. Take your time, right?
Be,
The
yeah,
journey.
be kind to yourself as you
Yeah,
explore these challenges, because it can be really confronting when a medical professional, tells you no, or doesn't want to participate in something that could improve your healthcare. But just like I said with the psych before, find another one. Just
exactly.
keep going till you find the right fit. And I'm getting closer. I am proud to say, with my general GP. Uh,
Yeah.
this is a big kind of vision thing, like what you've just discussed and what we've just discussed. Given your experience in reform and drug policy space, can you think of any really tangible small steps that can be taken to integrate cannabis more into the mainstream? Like, for example, people are constantly talking about the drug testing being a barrier to entry. Soft gel caps are something that you could consume that bypasses the saliva in your mouth and therefore could be more beneficial. That's also a product that could be useful in aged care or pediatrics. So that's a specific example from me. Is there
Mm-mm.
something that you can see that could make cannabis more mainstream? Because let's be honest, puffing on a vape of dry herb in a hospital bed isn't going to cut it. How can we get there though?
Yeah, there's lots of things that will contribute. I think the most, if we look at what we need to make it more mainstream, there's two audiences. There's healthcare professionals who require support, training, education, information. That typically they will take from their trusted source, which is either their education throughout their medical training, their ongoing CPD, which is provided by their medical colleges. So what is required is for doctors and for care teams is noting, and there's studies on this, there's stigma between doctors. Oh, you prescribe cannabis. Ugh.
Mm,
So that we need to take the medical community on a journey, and we need to do it in a way that meets them where they are. That's about forming partnerships, and strategic partnerships where there's win-win value for the medicos, for the colleges or the peak bodies, and then for the cannabis industry, or for the cannabis individual. The other audience is the public. Now, we know in Australia with advertising regulation, you can't advertise any medication, any therapeutic good in Australia. That applies to cannabis. It applies to anything that's not over the counter, right? That's a TGA rule. It's standard. No, they're not picking on cannabis. We are, it's not just cannabis. But the appropriate and allowed flow of information about cannabis goes from cannabis companies to doctors via peak bodies if necessary, but any cannabis person can say anything to any APRA registered practitioner. at any time. You can give them studies, you can give them coloring books, you can make things up, you can let them, smell terpenes, you can say and do anything to any ARPA registered practitioner, even though they don't all prescribe. So everyone's trying to get to the GPs, but there's a whole care team and plenty of specialists and allied health people, who aren't doctors, medical doctors, noting a specialist is, who can refer or influence. So any ARPA registered practitioner, anyone can say anything to them about cannabis, because the assumption from the TGA, and rightfully so, in one way, is that if someone has had medical training, they are more able to critically assess and analyse the information given to them, acknowledge what is and is not evidence, and take on that learning. Because of their level of education, you can say anything to them and they're smart enough to work out what's bullshit and what is science and what is correct. The next stage in that flow is that any ARPA registered practitioner can say anything to a patient within the clinical consult. A doctor cannot send a newsletter out to the 1,000 patients who are a part of their practice and say, hey, I'm now prescribing cannabis. That's advertising.
Yep.
But within a clinical consult, any ARPA registered practitioner can say anything to a patient, because again, the TGA trust that ARPA registered practitioner has the education and the good sense to do that in a way that is evidence-based, that's right for the patient, that's clinically informed. That's the whole flow that's allowed. Nothing outside of that is allowed. So any other information about cannabis that is reaching the public is largely illegal and considered advertising. There is an exception around research. So we can talk about research, and we can talk about and recruit for research studies, and we can talk about evidence. And that's a large part of what I'm able to do and why I'm able to be quite vocal, because a lot of my work is around that. So knowing that our audiences are medicos that we have to shift and the public that we have to shift, but noting the public can only be changed one public member at a time and only via an ARPA registered practitioner, it makes this audience much more critical, right? So in terms of the shift, they're the levers that we have to pull. I think we need to work out how to pull those levers better. And anything that we're doing outside of that, any games that we're playing, anytime we're on Reddit, breaking the law and whatever else, I get it. Cool, do it. I do think patients should be able to speak to patients, but you have to be very careful about how you frame those conversations, and you have to do it in a way that doesn't detract, because every time someone does something that is against regulation, they get made an example of, and then everyone else who's doing the right thing gets shat on, and then it pushes us all backwards. So there are compliant conversations that can be had. People just have to be strategic, and we're all learning. We're all on the journey.
During this conversation, Mel, you've alluded to your work with Canem. There are some amazing studies that I know that are happening in conjunction with other institutions. There's some work with Pain Week coming up. So please tell me about what Canem's got in the pipeline.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So I've been with Canem since pretty much I came into industry, first as a consultant for about 1.5 years, and now internally for 1 year as their healthcare strategy lead. What that means, what I get to do is I get to, or one part of what I get to do is oversee and project manage our research studies from the sponsor side in conjunction with Professor Mike Armour at Nickham and Western Sydney Uni, who is such a dream. So we have 2 studies with Nickham at the moment, and then we have a third study launching. So our 2 studies that are currently active that I am looking for participants for. So please let this be a call to action to participate in research. If you are age 20 plus and meet the other eligibility criteria, which includes, do you experience period pain, primary dysmenorrhea, even if it's only 2 days a month, even if it's moderate, and you would like to explore cannabis, medicinal cannabis as an option to contribute to the research to work out if we can prove that it could be one tool in managing that, please join the study. So it's very easy. We do it via telehealth. We do it, the Nickham team are amazing. And that's one of the ones we're doing at the moment. That study's been running for 12 months. We've just decided to extend it because we're getting really good results and we want to help more women and we want to build on that evidence. So 20 plus primary dysmenorrhea. If you are aged 45 to 65 and perimenopausal, so in the early stages of menopause, like myself.
That hair flick that goes with, oh, I'm perimenopausal.
I'm in my second
Own it,
sprinter.
baby.
Well, I'm
Own
not there yet, but I got the early
it.
signs. I get worked up in a meeting. I get a big hot flash. My neck goes red. Everyone at Canham knows. They're like, oh, God. But if you're 45 to 65 and experiencing and are in menopause, which there's a test that we do, and are experiencing sleeplessness and other symptoms, we are exploring if medicinal cannabis is a solution to some of those symptoms. And there's lots that we're assessing against. Both of those studies are observational studies. They're run via telehealth. They're run with NICM. Everything's ethics approved. They are really exciting studies, and we are hearing some really great participant feedback. Those studies continue to evolve. We are launching, and that women's health piece, of course, I love. We are launching a third study on National Pain Week. So National Pain Week in Australia runs every year. This year it is from the 21st till the 27th of July. National Pain Week is run by Chronic Pain Australia, who are Australia's largest chronic pain patient advocacy organisation, and it's run by an incredible team. One of the things, we were talking about change making and how do we craft narratives for the right people and how do we reach the right audiences, and I said a lot of it's about partnerships. I'm really pleased to share that this year, Canham, actually the Lemire Mission, our research portfolio, is the silver sponsor of National Pain Week with Chronic Pain Australia, which is terribly exciting. So it means that we can have a compliant, balanced, evidence-based conversation with Australia's chronic pain community. We've recorded an incredible webinar with Mike Armour from NICM, myself, and Holly Crawford, Olympic snowboarder.
Right.
Yeah, which is really cool. So that will go live. It's very balanced. It's very compliant. It's the right conversation for a large audience. We're doing up some fact sheets for them so that people within that community have access to balanced, compliant information about medicinal cannabis. And in a couple of weeks, I'm heading down to Canberra with John, the founder of Canham, and Mike Zakaris, our Chief Revenue Officer, to attend as VIPs a parliamentary event, which is where the Friends of Chronic Pain group, there'll be around 60 politicians in the room. And again, we get to have that cannabis conversation, debunk myths, answer questions, talk about our research. So if we want to create change, we need to create strategic partnerships with conservative organisations and have the right narrative in place. So that's what I get to do for a day job. How lucky am I?
Hell of a cool roundup there. I feel like, I've almost done you a disservice by not spending more time focusing on your day job here, but it all sounds really exciting. And I think it loops right back into that theme of working together. You're going to Canberra. You do want to shake things up. You do want to be bold, but you also know your audience and know what will get through to them. So very exciting things in the pipeline there for your work at Canham. I'm going to put in the show I'm going to put in the show note links for people to find those studies and find and potentially participate in that, along with
Please.
other links to Mel's amazing work. So, Mel, I've got one question and one segment left for you. The final question is, what's one myth or misconception about cannabis that you wish would die or disappear?
I love that. It's that cannabis is cannabis and people are people, and the relationship is no more complex than that. I would like to see an acknowledgement both internally for those who consume and do not consume the plant, and externally in the removal of that kind of misconception, that there is a relationship with the plant. Each person has one. If you don't consume, you have a relationship with it. Is it that you dislike it because of something that happened in your life? Is it that you're curious? What is your relationship with the plant? How do you feel about cannabis? And for those who do consume cannabis, what I really want is people to take a moment to explore, what is my relationship with cannabis? What does it bring to my life? What does it take from my life? How long have I been in this relationship? Does it serve me? Maybe it doesn't. What would I like to get out of my relationship with cannabis? And who can I see, a doctor, to help me articulate that. What resources can I learn? Can I listen to Give and Toke and learn more about the, everything that's occurring around the plant, so that I understand who the players are? So it would be, I really want people to be more thoughtful around what is their relationship with cannabis personally, whether you consume or not, and a broader understanding that it is in fact a relationship that needs to be had. And what I had forgotten to tell you, and this is an opportunity to do it, is that I'm heading to Iceland. I'm heading to Iceland in October to run a workshop actually on exactly this. So the Icelandic Hemp Association run an amazing conference. I'm speaking on Cannabis Queens and this topic, but also I'm running a half-day workshop with the head of the Icelandic Hemp Association, Sarah Pyan, our good friend, Professor Magnus, who's an Icelandic man, professor in the US, and myself, and we're running a half-day workshop exploring exactly this. What is your relationship with the plant? What are the practical ways you can address that? So yeah, it's coming really down to that personal level.
Shout out to Sarah Pyan, friend of the show, introduced the two of us. Thank you, Mel, for making that connection. If you haven't listened to her podcast, listeners, make sure you go check out Planted with Sarah Pyan. Well, Mel, we've reached the end of our conversation. The final segment is called Pawls of Wisdom, where we like to leave the listener with one key takeaway, call to action, or dinner party fact. You've given so many already, but what is the final Pawl of Wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Be the change. And I'm actually going to mirror something that you say all the time, because every time I hear you say it, I'm like, yeah, boy. So I'm going to do it for you today. Do something. Create something that you believe should exist in the world. Even if it's not, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be the final word. Just create something, or participate in something. Be the change. Take some action. If you have a belief, take some action towards it. And the one that I would specifically encourage is participating in research, because I'm investing most of my week in this research. Canam's investing a lot of money. Nickham's investing a lot of their academic presence in this research. So we need people to participate. So that's one really great example of how you can be the change. Yeah, take action, whatever that looks like.
You're speaking my language, Mel. It's why we're such good friends. It's why you remain dear to me today, tomorrow, in the past. Again, the book is Cannabis Queens. It is available at cannabisqueens.world. You can check out, there's some cute little grinders there. The book is amazing. It's filled with incredible stories, incredible women. Mal, this has been an incredible conversation. All relevant show notes will be in the link below. Melanie Wentzel, thank you for being on Give and Toke.
I cannot thank you enough. My cup is full.
Peace.